So after Dillon, things were getting bleak for us. Small town, first
After
2
we
weeks already
learned that
went cold.
Gurkowski wasn't our
Take
man,
my shoes
position
off.
of
I didn't know
People
where
just
to turn
wanna
next.
be- They're good
And
people.
start happening to
Just
everyone
like
else.
everyone else felt. All the songs.
It's
And
got to.
comfortable.
Kind of
And
felt
it's
you
a
wanna
small
be
town around here.
but we had no idea where to start.
2 more months have gone by. In that time, over 95 pairs of socks have gone missing. Special Agent Haynes continued to interview suspects until nearly everyone in Hilford from the ages of 20 to 65 were found to be innocent.
In a town as small as this, the options are pretty narrow.
The Bureau was waiting for answers, but Agent Haynes had none to give. And soon thereafter, to everyone's surprise, the socks stopped disappearing.
The man who made socks disappeared.
No leads and no more disappearances meant the case had to be closed.
I mean, everybody thought once the FBI came in that, this was going to be solved really quick and life would go back to normal. But even they had difficulty.
That was a really rough day when we realized that we'd exhausted all our options. There was no more leads. It gone dry.
We had to call the investigation off.
I still regret it.
As a community, it was hard because we wanted to know who was doing this, and we also became close friends with Detective Haynes.
And at that point, I had to leave the town that embraced me with such love, and I felt bad that I was letting them down.
Hilford, California, located 72 miles south of the Oregon border. 4 years after Gerald Lee Page, it was just another town like any other. And for the people of Hilford, California, life became simple again.
Whoever was stealing all these socks just stopped, and life went back to normal.
Things were back to normal. We really reached a homeostasis.
Yeah, people were walking their dogs again. The sheriff was back to beating up on my family. Things were good.
He's black and Jewish. Of course the sheriff's gonna go after him, right? A black Jew. Come on.
I felt safe and secure in this town again, and I know a lot of people who feel the same. Everyone's socks were securely on their feet, and life just went on.
And then, it happened.
Just as the community began to move on, the unimaginable happened. After 4 years of silence, he had returned.
The local Gazette published a letter from someone named Sean Hawks. And we checked all the databases, and there was no one, in fact, named Sean Hawks. But the content of this letter is what makes us believe it's from our suspect.
This is the sock thief speaking. I dealer of the socks in Hilford 4 years ago. To prove this, here is one of the socks.
I was thinking this might be a copycat, but then I read the next line.
I am not a copycat. I am really him.
It was definitely him.
You were all nice targets. I think I shall take all your socks now. Just clean out all of the dressers and store shelves. I am back and stronger than before. I will see you soon, but you will never see me. Ha, ha, ha.
The day the letter was published, calls flooded the sheriff's office, reporting missing socks. But this time, it was different.
He was better.
Socks weren't just disappearing from people's feet anymore. They were going missing at the stores, at the laundromat.
From homes, dressers, laundry hampers alike.
Anywhere you can imagine a sock would be, it no longer was there.
In just one day, half of the socks in Hilford were gone. It was the largest sock theft in American history. Without hesitation, the sheriff called Special Agent Haynes.
On his personal phone.
The Bureau offered the case to Special Agent Haynes. During the 4-year hiatus, he was haunted by what he was unable to finish.
Couldn't stop thinking about it. I lost many nights of sleep thinking about this case not being finished, and it's all those people's socks went missing off their feet without them knowing and seeing it or feeling it. And I could do nothing to help them and give them closure. So in return, I couldn't get closure.
He was ashamed to face the community, but they embraced him as they had 4 years earlier. Special Agent Haynes was back 100% and fully determined to finish what he started. In order to catch this Sean Hawks, Haynes looked to different avenues of insight this time around. At first, he looked to science for help.
Well, from a physics perspective, it's not impossible. It is improbable, but not impossible.
Dr. Charles Owens was a world-renowned physicist who was brought onto the case to understand the physical science behind stealing socks without being detected.
Someone could theoretically hold on to the back of your socks and pull them so fast that the atoms and the molecules inside your socks disappear for mere seconds.
Dr. Owens ran through many scenarios with Special Agent Haynes.
So, if someone would have taken the socks using a black hole...
Eventually, one of Dr. Owens' ideas did make sense to the Special Agent.
From a physics perspective, hypnotism is very possible. But it is impossible.
Hypnotism. For Haynes, this was an interesting lead. Determined, he went to the Hilford Library to look through old archives and telephone books, trying to find the hypothetical hypnotist who may have done this. But he was unable to. And just when he was ready to quit, he found something. This flyer for the Hilford Magic Club would change the investigation forever. The Magic Club was disbanded the previous year, but one member was still a practicing magician in the Hilford area.
Hello. My name is Eduardo. You might know me better by my street name, the Great Splendini.
The Great Splendini was the leader of the Hilford Magic Club. He claims that the group was very well known, although according to the community, the club wasn't very impressionable.
Nothing major, just, group of amateur magicians, mostly kids, meeting a few times a week to practice magic tricks.
According to Splendini, they catered to a wide array of venues.
Birthday parties, graduations, quinceañeras, corporate parties, funerals, etc.
The club was for magicians 20 and under, which would explain how all of its members went under the radar during the first investigation. But Haynes had to ask himself, could a kid really do something as evil as this? Although unlikely, Haynes asked Splendini about each member's whereabouts during the hiatus period. He told him that there were 2 members of the club that went away to college during those years. This raised immediate red flags for the special agent. The first was Francis Friedauer, and the other, Gerald Lee Page. Both Page and Friedauer attended a prestigious magic university during the hiatus.
The University of Magic. the school for wizardry, craftsmanship, and the arts.
And sure enough, both came back into town just before the Sean Hawks letter was published. While doing their research into UM, Haynes and McCutcheon found startling evidence.
At the U of M, we found that they were experiencing an all-time high in sock theft during the 4-year period that our criminals seem to have disappeared.
It was at this point where I had to ask myself, is this magic? But then I had to really stop and thinking, is it magic?
Haynes was all in on this lead, a magician with great training in sleight of hand and deception. It had to be one of them, and by looks alone, it was obvious who became the first suspect.
We really started keying in on Francis.
He just came off as the type of man who would do such things as steal people's socks.
There was something about him that just seemed a little bit off, if you ask me, and some other people as well.
When you look at Francis, there's sort of a mischievous glare in his eye. He's definitely the kind of person that would do this.
Francis was one of the original members of the Magic Club back in 2005. He quickly struck up a friendship with fellow Magic Club member Gerald Lee Page.
It was one of the balloon tricks I was doing. It was something with Penny and 2 clown noses, but while I was doing my trick, I felt like the most magical thing wasn't even in my hands. It was right in front of me. It was in his eyes, and it just kept on going back and forth every time I did a trick. It's like, we saw something in each other. That's magic.
Francis and Gerald did everything together. Wherever Gerald went, Francis went with him, and the community noticed.
Gerald and Francis were, always together.
Oh yeah, if you ran into Gerald at the store, Francis was right there behind him. Always behind him,
It was like Francis was kind of obsessed with Gerald.
Francis looked up to Gerald, both as a magician and as a friend.
Oh my god. Oh, he was phenomenal. Also in terms of just, I think, crowd engagement, it wasn't just the tricks he had up his sleeves. It's just, he can kind of, sneak up behind you.
He really brought us pride and a sense of accomplishment.
And I just wanted to follow him wherever he was going to go. I felt like if I was going to improve myself, I should follow him wherever he's going to go.
By the summer of 2010, he left with Gerald to attend UM, coincidentally just a few months after the investigation ended. During their senior year at UM, Francis began to see that the world had lost much of its interest in magic as a profession.
It just became kind of disenchanted, and as there was less spark in my life, I just became very separate from Gerald.
After graduating and moving back into Hilford, Francis and Gerald had a falling out.
It was strange. It felt like he was trying to avoid me or just put me to the side, but there was no clear communication as to why.
Their friendship fell apart. The two stopped speaking to each other as Gerald cut off all communication from his friend. During his interview, Francis came clean on a long-held secret.
This is gonna be kind of hard for me to say, but we were lovers.
Everyone knew they were gay.
It was true. Everyone knew, except for Francis, who didn't know that they knew.
For years, we kept it a secret.
We all knew.
We knew they were lovers. No one cared, except for maybe the sheriff.
It was just hard to, I think, speak about sometimes when people knew me as someone else.
Of course they were gay.
Everyone knew that they were gay. Not that anything's wrong with that, of course.
Through Francis, Haynes began to learn about Gerald Lee Page and began to suspect that he might be the true culprit. But the sheriff was set on Francis. An argument between the sheriff and the special agent ensued when Haynes determined that Francis wasn't the right guy. The sheriff so desperately wanted to be the one to catch the sock thief and save his town that he began to confuse what was right and wrong. To prove to the community that he was no fool, one night the sheriff went looking for Francis.
The sheriff decided to take things into his own hands, unfortunately, and did some unspeakable things to Francis.
Just admit it. I know you did it, you dirty old homosexual.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Alright, that's enough of that. Sometimes, you gotta just do things the old-fashioned way. You know what we used to do to boys like you back in my day?
What are you doing?
Why'd you do it? Why'd you take all those socks?
I don't know what to.
I know it was you. There's no one else it could possibly be. I know you've been feeling those socks.